Hey everyone, welcome back to Care Spot. I'm your host Francis, and I'm excited to be back with a fresh new episode, just as I promised. But before we begin today's episode, I want to express my deepest condolences to the people of Spain, particularly those ones affected by the devastating floods in Valencia, in eastern Spain. The loss of life and the widespread damage um, are truly heartbreaking. Um, my thoughts are with the victims and their families during this difficult time. Let us hope for swift recovery and resilience and the spirit that the locals showed in coming together to help each other from different parts of the country to these affected areas. That's something really, really beautiful to see, to watch. And we also pray for Barcelona because I can see that in the past few hours also the same um, signs the system detected some storms that are hovering over Barcelona could be faced with the same kind of situation in the next few days, unfortunately. So we hold you into prayers and we hope that this whole thing with these floods and rains and this situation kind of boils down because there's so much damage that is being caused, the cars and houses and lives that have been lost. It's just something very sad, heartbreaking. And the same goes for our neighbors in Cyprus. Also, I saw that in Limassol there was kind of a situation also taking place with a heavy floods. I don't know, in Europe, in Poland. There's different countries having this kind of issue going on right now. It's sad to see, but I don't know what is really going on. The climate is really difficult. It's changed. But anyway, we have you in prayers, guys, and we hope everything is going, gets to be better. So, in today's show, we're diving into a complex issue that is plaguing many popular destinations across Europe: over tourism. Yes, let's talk about it. It's about time we talk about this one. While tourism has undoubtedly brought economic benefits to these regions, to most of the European countries, including Greece, where I'm living, it has also led to significant challenges to local residents. So, stick around for a minute. We're going to be diving into soon. You're listening to Guest Spot. Yes. Okay. Now, if you've been around, or you've been following a little bit of the events that have been happening this year and the past year, the previous year, there's much that's been going on. There's been an uproar uh, about over tourism. Now, uh, the dichotomy of different individuals' experience when a popular city surges with tourism is striking. I'll tell you that. You know, um, from a vacationer's point of view and experience, it's an excitement. You know, the chance to forget the tensions in the home city. You know, visit more scenic places in the world, meet the locals, eat new food. But for the residents of the tourist city where you're visiting, for example, the recent sentiment suggests a completely different experience. The lack of housing, uh, adequate infrastructures, and the essential materials, as well as pollution. This is what the residents are going through, and these are the things that might not be seen being paid attention to, except for the previous periods where people are starting to voice their discomfort with the whole situation. As a result, there's been a rise in protests across Europe, by local residents of these most famous, destinations. In Europe, generally, like not only Spain or Greece, but for example, in the Canary Islands, in Amsterdam, Venice, in Barcelona. You know, it's like with all these protests going on, though, the most interesting aspect, according to the data that is out there, it shows that in the first quarter of 2024, this year, international travel to Europe was 7.2% higher than it was before the pandemic, with a total of 120 million travelers, visiting. So that's a huge number. That is post-pandemic. That is like the numbers are way higher than the pre-pandemic levels that I have, but which is understandable if you think about it. So now this situation presents, an interesting crossroad. Local residents want to decrease the volume of tourists traveling to their countries, but this volume is growing rapidly, So which is like these two, concepts are really had to be, their collision is inevitable. Like they have to be addressed. Either way, the people had to find a way to go about it. Now, here's the interesting historical, perspective on tourism. When it's especially in Europe here. Well, now the history of tourism in Europe, provides a valuable insights into this phenomenon, like the whole thing. Historically, the tourist cities wanted to incentivize, as many tourists to visit as possible. I mean, after all, the more tourists, the more the revenue. It's just like direct proportional. The more they come, the more you expect people are going to get money out of it. The whole situation, which is how economics works. Now, for example, in the 80s, Venice, the Italian city, promoted itself as a tourist destination, especially starting in, with the development of the luxury hotels, the international festivals, were held in the city to attract a lot of people. And the same story goes with the rest of them. The other places they did the promote, which was like they encouraged people to come to Europe, and it works. When you advertise, of course you're gonna expect people to come through. That is the whole purpose of advertising. So you attract people through the advertisements that you're gonna create, promoting any destination. This boosted Europe, the Europe's economic activities. With hotels and restaurants and guides and goods and anything. So it was very effective, For example, the Canary Islands, 35% of the overall GDP of these islands, in 2022, came directly from tourism. So those numbers, they are almost 16.9 billion euros revenue in 2022, straight from tourism. The entirety of Spain, which has seen many untourism tourists, by the way, and that's why actually I'm focused a little bit on this Spain, because that's where mostly we've seen these untourism protests taking place. 12.8% of the national GDP came from tourism in 2023, last year only. So the economic gained around 238 billions. So this raises an interesting question. If tourism really boosts the economies of these, many countries, these countries like this, then why are the locals protesting? That's the question that you may ask yourself. Someone will be like, why don't you, very ungrateful, why don't you just be happy that you get people coming to see, or your country, or anything like that. But it's a double-edged situation, sword situation, whatever you want to call this one. For example, there are two kinds of different eras of protests that happened, because this, as I told you, this matter is not something that started like last year or the year before, but this was like even pre-COVID. So you had before the pandemic, people were just kind of protesting, but but tourism still was taking place, but it wasn't so rampant like as it was like post-pandemic. For example, there's some groups that were in 2019 that were like they vandalized rental cars, and in I think it was, which city was it? It was in Mallorca, I think, yeah, in Mallorca. So they vandalized cars and they smashed them. But the point they put up, front was, all right, these cars that are used by tourists, they contribute to pollution. So hence these have to be smashed. And that was pre-COVID. So they also went ahead about how the tourism labor, or the people working in the industry are underpaid and they're getting exploited from the industry itself. So they're it's kind of protest. But then the economy hit a very unexpected pause, which was the COVID. We all know what happened. We lived through the whole situation. I mean, when it comes to places that the industry, that were hit really hard, where this was the tourism industry. We all know that international travel was kind of banned, so the halting tourist activity around the world. So in Europe alone, non-European tourists decreased by around 70%, and of course, as it was expected, lack of tourism during this period would ruin livelihoods of many residents in cities. So this happened, and this really happened. People went out of business. There's no work. People, the restaurant owners, hotels, small hotels, didn't have work. But then within this whole complex of situation, that they say every situation there's no singularity in any kind of situation. Every situation has like two sides to it. There's two sides of a coin of any kind of situation, whether you choose to see it or not. What happened within this period was this vacuum that was created from the absence of the travelers kind of opened eyes, or kind of gave back the power to the local people who lived in these highly touristic destinations or places or cities that were very busy, the likes of Venice, the likes of Barcelona, Amsterdam. These the ones the one I mentioned, the Paris and all these places. They became empty. In Athens here, it was, you could go to Acropolis, like walking all these highly visited places. They are empty because of course it was kind of because of the obvious reason for the COVID situation. But then the locals got to experience something that they didn't have to experience, though they hadn't experienced for ages, for decades. We remember the numbers of pollution decreased significantly in the whole world, not only in Europe, in the whole world. The people used to stroll these parks and these places they used to, where normally they have like crowds of people just walking freely. So it's like giving power to the locals. They took back their cities for a minute, and this is something that didn't had experienced for a long time. But it wasn't for long. Then all this isolation and all these lockdowns and regulations kind of were phased out, and hence allowing people to travel again. Now, as you can imagine, everyone being locked away, people were very, very eager to travel, to leave the houses, to leave their homes. So most of the European countries were kind of stunted or kind of struggling without tourism. It did not only recover, it also surged pre the COVID levels. That's why the numbers are totally like the numbers are totally like it was almost 7.2 post COVID. For example, in the first 6 months, you had people like around 42.5 million visiting all this much more, like in Eastern Europe, in Spain, in Venice around 11.5. So this all data reflected the increase of different tourists, people coming in crowds. We went out, everyone wanted to go out. So in response to this, remember, so everyone was kind of wanting the visitors to come back, but again they came back in big numbers. So protests erupted again in Europe, especially in Spain, in different territories and islands and all this stuff. Most of these, they were like, the cities are being taken over by the tourists. They're trying to find the neighborhoods they can't. They found different groups fighting for their neighborhoods and cities. They feel like their power that they enjoyed for many times was taken out again. They were taken away from them again. So we remember all these events on the TV. We see that like the people were hit by squad guns, squatting wood on them while eating in restaurants and all that stuff. So that happened right in the cities. So this happened again after the surge of people coming back. So people were fighting to get back their own cities that they were, taken away from them. But now, when you look closely, in most of all these areas, all these cities, all countries, all destinations, the reasons behind the protests are similar. Come to Greece, go to Spain, go to Paris, to go to Amsterdam, goes to the Canary Islands, go to anywhere. The reasons are the same. They're all the same. Inaccessible housing, excessive pollution, scarce essential services and resources, and the general lack of adequate infrastructure. This is pretty much the basis of every protest that you see. Everyone is saying the same thing. Be it on the islands, be it in the main cities, they have the same issues. For example, the most thing which was really on the top of the list is the housing is scarce, because most of the houses are slowly being converted into tourist accommodations, and the rent is unaffordable, in most cities. There are more tourist, beds than local residents. Residents are priced out of their, long-term houses using, by their landlords to seek profit to convert the housing into short-term rentals. This situation really, some local residents, they are really forced to live in their cars and camper vans. And the sad part about the whole situation is many of these individuals are people that are essential for the day-to-day livelihoods of the society. I mean, we're speaking about like teachers and health providers, and I know specific cases that happened, for example, in Mykonos where I work, where teachers couldn't find housing for, and these teachers are the one that educating the people, the students of the island. So, but this is something which happened, and it is something which is true. So you have areas like where I read some articles where I think it was in Ibiza where the police they couldn't recruit people because they didn't have housing for the forces for them, so with all these things, with all, for example, when it comes to to pollution, so the locals were trying to advocate for more sustainable practices, that protect the natural resources, the environment, and local infrastructures. I mean, when you go to on a busy day in the Acropolis, my friend, you you can't imagine it. It's a tug of war to go up there, and so you're faced with it's a timing. You have to find the right time slot to go up there when it's not people. In Venice, people were crying about the same situation, cruise ships and all these other historical sites. Noise pollution, oh god, that's the worst. I don't like noise, good lord. So in some places locals are complaining about the noise being from the bars or from clubs, anything, because it's very very, if it's in the city and it's not very far from these, for example, the entertainment areas, so it's good. Sometimes the music is loud, the people are loud, loudspeakers everywhere. So these all they were wrapped into some of the concerns that were people raising for the reason. Now recently, in what was called these games which just wrapped up in France, the Olympics. For example, Paris is a city with around 11.3 million people staying there. But you have, for the Paris Olympics, you had around 9.5 million individuals tickets that were purchased. Like, if the city's accommodation or capacity, is around 11.3 plus 9.5, you can imagine that the amount of pressure that's going to be exerted to the people that are living there. They feel that it's like an invasion, you know what I mean? So people, of course, you remember the people, the French were geared up about with protesting against the Olympics and all this. There's some kind of riots that were put up together to stand against this, but they kind of phased out. They found some solution. Some things die, some things stay. They don't get the results that they want. So protesters they argued that they don't have enough stores and resources, because most of these highly touristic areas, it's very rare to find stores to get like the essential services that you need for your day-to-day, like typical grocery stores, because most of these places are going to be transformed into things that serve the guests, the tourists, souvenir stores and all these things, So this kind of leaves the locals stranded without places to serve their needs, hardware stores, and they can't get things to be done or to serve that. From a business point of view, you want to invest or to open up a business that's going to be profitable for you. For a businessman, it's going to always cater for where there's demand. The demand, if the demand is from the tourists or the travelers, of course, it's going to have to open something that is going to cater to that audience or to those needs rather than their local needs. So, from all points of view, it's a 6 or a 9, depends on where you see it from. Now, it's these left the locals feeling that they're being taken as secondary. They're non-prioritized. Like the states are not prioritizing the locals. Everything is like it's just like to take care of the tourist attractions instead of the provision of necessary resources to the permanent residents. So that happens, and this is one of the root cause of these sentiments, and that is shared around the whole argument with this whole thing. The thing is, but where the misunderstanding is that I read about in these articles around, which is on like out of Europe, that the people think that residents don't like tourists, but that's not true. Many residents' concerns are not like they don't like tourism, but rather they don't like over tourism. Everyone knows that these cities are surviving from the guests from the coming, so that means it's not like it's like lack of housing or inaccessible services and resources. The issue do not seem to stem from the direct, actions of individual tourists, but the locals rather like they're objecting to the systematic changes, that are just like designed to accommodate and profit from tourism. The sentiment has been expressed through the protests as residents in various cities argue for a more sustainable mode. They want tourism to attempt to clarify that, and attempt to clarify they are against the concept of deregulated mass tourism, not tourism in general. They don't want to get rid of tourism. They just want to be the governments to find a way to regulate these things, to find a way to regulate this machine. It's the feeding hand, but how do we incorporate it into our lives as well, so that we don't have a booming tourism industry on the cost of the permanent residents? Because now you're going to evacuate everyone in the place, then you're going to remain with these cities like theme parks, whereby someone goes, they're busy in a period of time and they're not in the other times. So the locals are all pushed away, yet the locals should be able to enjoy, the fruits of the tourism. They don't feel like they're the secondary to all what is being planned when it comes to to this whole situation. We know that there's clear economic benefits from the tourism industry, as the numbers show from the GDP show what it did from the tourism when it rebounded. Like you saw the numbers, the contribution about 235 million euros. That's a lot of money for any economy to be gained from one industry. So it's what is actually most of regions in Europe. They are benefiting from this, So it's the balance that has to be made, because in some cases, for example, in remote islands, in Greece, tiny islands, when you have a lot of tourists coming in, there's a risk of depletion of like the critical resources, and the water is not enough at some point. That happens in sometimes when the numbers are not regulated. These places are not able to accommodate huge numbers. So the governments in Europe, they've tried to start to address this issue. For example, the Greek officials actually planning to impose a tax for cruise ship visitors during the peak season. You might need around 20 euros, when you visit most of the islands. In Greece doesn't have that big of an issue when it comes to, it's not very severe, except for two islands, the popular ones, Santorini and Mykonos, especially in Santorini. So the Prime Minister expressed this, actually say this, they say that same thing, that he doesn't have the over-tourism problem. So they're trying to find a way how to, to curb this. Now they're trying to tax people, the tourists visiting the islands. And also there's a system that is planned. They're planning to to use again, which is called what's the name of that whole thing? Oh God, it escapes me. It's a cruise ship bath. I think digital cruise ship bath. That's called bath, BERTH, which is it allocates cruise ships when to visit, which one to prioritize to give to allow, and the goal or the plan was to allow to give priority to cruise ships that are staying longer, which means that in this way, most of the visitors won't be rushed from from one spot to the next one, trying to rush to places. So they would take time to stay, and reducing on the commotion that happens within during these hours. So they're trying to find this way in these situations. In other cities, for example, they're trying to crack down on illegal short-term rentals, restricting, large groups in certain areas. In Barcelona, I think they implemented something about I think it's called what's the name? No segue zones. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. They were they're trying to increase the parking tickets and taxes. They try. Everyone is coming up with their way to do that. But what was interesting, one thing that I read about Venice, which was really fascinating, was about the taxes. Because Venice was also trying to implement the same thing about taxing people coming into the city, and the locals rejected the whole concept because they said they were afraid that one, the taxes might not be used for their right purposes. That's for one, and also it may also just turn into a place to be like a theme park where you just pay to enter and then leave, which is either way they're going to advertise the place for people to come through, but still it won't solve the issue of people of over tourism, which they're really trying to fight to work out. So it's kind of it's in the hands of the states to find really a very convenient means to find something that's going to be working, but also to remember that the more these processes that also happen, if the more they take long to address these issues, it also kind of affects the destination reputation, because the tourists themselves are increasingly fearful of traveling to cities to certain cities because of the threat posed by the protesters. So the government really they're under pressure to find something which is very convenient. So you as a traveler, you have to keep that in mind, but you also have to understand where these people are coming from. So if you're traveling, but you just have to, my advice is always to find the sweet spots. Like if you can afford to travel and if you feel like you can't cope with the crowds and all the stuff, you always try to travel in what we call the shoulder months. Now if you want to visit, to do city breaks, for example, Athens right now city is this time is the best time to travel around like Europe. All the cities are kind of really simple, not very crowded. All the sites that you want. If you travel around this time, you're gonna enjoy all the city breaks. If you're looking for island experiences, really you have to capitalize right in the months of like May, June, and September and October around that. So if you skip the high peak season of the summer, which is pretty much where the crowds can tend to be, the numbers tend to be high, so you can still enjoy without feeling that um, you're getting you're getting caught up into the crazy of the crowds, and also you contribute in a way that you reduce on the crowds that travel in the same period, which is in a high season, which creates the pressures to the people. But yeah, it's more in the hands of the states to find a way which is more convenient, and I think with that, the ball is in the hand of the governments and all these states there. But I'm sure they're going to find a way that is more convenient. Um, this is really it's been a good one, and I think it's a good take that I wanted to have a take on this issue, but I knew it's a very very serious one. I didn't want to just come and just wing it like that, so I had to make sure that I really do some deep research about it and understand, because it's a very very there's a fine line that you walk around with this kind of this dialogue. So I want to know what's your take on this whole situation. What do you think? Should the locals should the government do in this kind of situation? What's your take on this whole situation of over tourism that is bothering most of the European cities? Because we need the revenue, we need, especially we who work in the industry, we need the people, we need the travelers. We don't want the travelers to feel that we don't want them to come through, but we want them to come through. But the thing is, how can we do it where both parties can benefit? The locals don't want to feel like they're left out, but also we want to make sure that we still get the earning, get the revenue that we get from the whole thing. So you can drop me a message, you can send me an email at ksportpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment. You can listen to this podcast anywhere. It's gonna be from all platforms. Apple Podcasts, from YouTube. Our YouTube channel is up, Care Sport, so you can go there as well. We upload all the episodes there, so you can check out the earlier episodes that you missed, that you might catch up. So I think this one is a good one. Until next one, stay safe and be good. I'm out.